Lawrence Alma Tadema was a Dutch-born painter who worked in Britain in the second half of the 19th century. Alma Tadema helped to pioneer a new kind of classical painting, whereas traditionally classical subjects were usually stories of gods and goddesses from ancient Greek and Roman mythology, or stories of great classical heroes. Alma Tadema painted scenes of everyday life in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, sometimes quite mundane domestic subjects, and he did that as a way of helping to really bring the past to life and make it really vivid for the people of his own time in the 19th century. This is a fairly early example of Alma Tadema's work. It's called Phidias and the Frieze of the Parthenon, and it shows a scene in ancient Athens in the 430s BC. And this is the sculptor Phidias, here he is in the middle, unveiling his work on the Parthenon frieze. Now, Alma Tadema would have been familiar with the Parthenon marbles. He would have seen them in the British Museum in the 1860s. But in this painting, it's very typical of his work that he really tries to bring the subject to life and to try to imagine just how exciting it would have been for people in ancient Athens to see these sculptures for the very first time. So here we have Phidias presiding over a kind of private view of his work, unveiling it for the very first time, and he has the Athenian VIPs lining up to get their first sight of these new sculptures. Now, this painting, although it shows an event happening in the distant past, hundreds of years before Tadema's own time, this was actually tapping into some quite contemporary debates around classical art. In the 19th century, classical sculpture was regarded as the highest form of art, and it was greatly admired for its purity of form. And its purity of form was really sort of inextricably linked with its purity of surface, the idea of the purity and cleanness of classical white marble, was the white sculptures that we associate so much with ancient Greece and ancient Rome. But archaeologists were actually arguing that in the ancient world these sculptures weren't originally white, they would have been painted in very bright colours, just as Alma Tadema shows them on the frieze here, these bright ochres and blues and whites. And it was actually quite a controversial idea. People found it quite hard to accept that these very pure, very sort of undefiled sculptures could have been so bright, almost like sort of fairground sculptures. And so by painting a picture like this, Alma Tadema was really kind of setting out his stall and entering into the debate. And when this picture was first shown in the 1860s, it did help to reignite this whole debate about how ancient sculptures had originally appeared. So we have Alma Tadema bringing the ancient world to life in the way in which he paints these subjects, these scenes of Athenian life, painted with great attention to archaeological detail. And at the same time, he's also tapping into contemporary debates about what the ancient world was actually like.